Hey, I'm Nick DiMatteo, and welcome to week 50 of Music is Not a Genre. Each week I take a release or several from my collection. I discuss them, I give you my take on them, I throw in some interesting info, and I connect it to my music, other music in the world, and the world in general. If you like this kind of talk, whatever platform you're on, please subscribe, sign up, whatever it takes, share this. I know I'm on multiple platforms, by the way. If you didn't know that now, it's a good time to announce it. And this in particular podcast will be there soon. But not just on YouTube and on Patreon, I also have the audio version only of these podcasts on Spotify, soon to be on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever it's called. Several other podcast streaming services, so be on the lookout for that as well. Anchor is my main thing there, and I'm really excited to continue to do that. And if you also don't know, I will be starting a new interview series where I'm interviewing other people in the music world, which will be featured only on my Patreon page, so please consider subscribing to that. This week is a special week. It is the end of an era. If you've been following along, yes, this is the 50th video podcast, but I believe it is the 224th week that I've been doing this. Started just text and photos only. I started with my cassette collection, and then I moved to my vinyl collection, LPs and EPs and 45s and 78s and all that stuff. And here we are. I had 6 left, and I decided, weatherman, Stormfront, I decided, screw it, 50's a great number, and I'm not 100% sure what to do with these 6, so I'm going to blow out the whole rest of my collection and start something new next week, which you can check out next week, and I'll talk about that more later. And that's why I'm calling this week's podcast Bad Ocean Freddie 5 Whistlebird. Let me do that again. Bad Ocean Freddie 5 Whistlebird. This is the end of vinyl. For me, not for the world, but for me. So the reason I called it that, as you may be able to guess from the first one, is that there are 6 albums or singles here, and each one of those words has to do with one of those. And here's the thing. You've heard me say this before. I'm going to say it again because I think it bears repeating. I don't care how music comes to me. I never have. When vinyl was the thing, I did vinyl. When 8-track was the thing, I did 8-track. With cassettes, then CDs, then MP3s and waves and all of that, and then streaming, which I guess is where we are now. I don't care how it comes to me. The more and the easier, the better. I'm not a purist. I'm not someone who believes that one is qualitatively better than another. I think all have their pros and cons. I happen to think that the highest quality lossless file is the best way to listen to something depending on the speakers you have. And that's another huge thing. I'm a musician and a creator and a producer and all that, and I talk about this with other musicians, and we all talk about how no matter how well you record something, you can't account for how someone is listening to it. Could be on the greatest headphones or the crappiest. The greatest speakers are the crappiest. Could be on the speakers in their TV or on an Alexa or one of those devices. You can't control that. So you mix the best you can and you let it go. And as a listener, I feel the same way. However it comes to me, whatever speakers, if I'm enjoying the music, that's what counts, right? But of course, there's a special warm place in my heart for vinyl, as there is for so many people, because I grew up with it. And that's why this is kind of a momentous episode, because I'm closing out my vinyl collection, Let's get to it. So these have some very small things in common and maybe some nothing at all in common, if that makes any sense. The first one, Bad Company. 10 from 6. So this is one of their greatest hits collections, which was released in 1985, and it's probably when I bought it. It's a band. This is how I say this. There are many different sub styles of every type of music you can think of. Just think about how many styles of hip hop there are, country or whatever. Same goes for rock. You know, you have the first, which was rock and roll, which got shortened to rock when things got a little harder. And then there's, you know, prog rock and just, you know, indie rock and on and on and on and on and on. Psychedelic rock. I think in every era there is a band or several bands, handful of bands, that are the quintessential representation of a certain style for that era. You know, in the 70s, for rock, for the simple, no bones, nothing embellished or special or crossed over or anything like that, for rock, Bad Company was the band. Can't Get Enough of Your Love, Feel Like Making Love, You Know That You Are a Shooting Star, or whatever it's called. Bad Company, the song, Rock and Roll Fantasy. I mean, so many great songs. If you don't know, Bad Company, fronted by Paul Rodgers, came out of the band Free, which spanned late 60s, early 70s, and they had the hit All Right Now, which you may know. So same singer, same, you know, almost not quite completely the same personnel. And they also did a song called Oh, I Wept, which I had not discovered until I watched the show Devs with Nick Offerman. And they had it in this sequence, and I just was blown away by the song. I mean, context means something too. But I would recommend looking Oh, I Wept up, and I would recommend listening to Bad Company's greatest hits. You know, I mean, they're very, very worthy. But as I am saying this, you are staring at the man, William J. Ocean, I don't know his middle name, and this single, this 12-inch single here, released in 1986, Love Zone. Anybody who doesn't like Billy Ocean is missing a piece of their humanity. I'm just going to say it. That may not even be your type of music, but there is no way to dislike what this guy did in the 80s. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's how it is. That's the same to me with somebody like Phil Collins. You know, he for a while was getting a really bad rap. I don't know why, but he's one of those people, like, if you don't like at least some of what he did in the 80s, then you're not human. You're just not human. And I mean that very, very literally. But in this case, you know, so he had so many hits in the 80s. Out of My Dreams Into My Car, Caribbean Queen, There'll Be Sad Songs to Make You Cry, or whatever it is, and several others. Love Zone was one of them. I don't know it as well as the ones I just mentioned, but I re-listened to it and I'm like, yeah, okay, so smooth R&B with a little bit of a, you know, island tinge to it, and his, you know, that rich, you know, voice that just puts you in a good mood when you hear it. You know, it's worth looking up. Has nothing in common with Bad Company. Well, you know, not nothing. Everything has something in common. And then we get to another smooth dude, Freddie Jackson, with his 12-inch You Are My Lady, his biggest hit ever, released in 1985. He was one of those dudes like Peabo Bryson, like the late, sadly, James Ingram, who just defined like smooth soul R&B vocals for the 1980s. You know, and this is a song, I haven't heard it in a long time. I can still hear the entire chorus in my head. I mean, it's again, it's one of those, you want to chill out, put this on. Okay, I'll confess, I don't know why I have this. I am fairly sure that this is, again, another one of my brother's albums that I inherited because I looked at it and said, this is interesting, let me not throw this away. So I don't have a real connection to this, but I did my research, and Five Star was a British pop R&B band. They had several hits in the 1980s, including 5 from this album, Let Me Be the One, which I kind of do hear in my head. You know, when I read that, I do kind of remember Let Me Be the One. I think that's how it goes. Was their biggest U.S. hit, and I didn't know they were British until I looked them up and kind of read about them. And, you know, congratulations on them for having such a huge, you know, hit album here. But it got me thinking, and I don't know if I've said this before. If so, I'll say it again. I often prefer British R&B acts to American R&B acts in the modern era, the last 20 years or so. And that's not because there aren't great people on both sides, and there's great acts on both sides, I should say, of the Atlantic Ocean, or that there's not something valuable in even stylistically in both kinds of R&B. But what I've found, and it could be just a cultural thing, is that British R&B tends to not feel like they need to adhere to the strictness of what R&B should be, quote unquote, the way American R&B does, both in production and in content. And that's why it's always been a little bit more interesting to me. And that probably held true to some degree even in the 1980s, but certainly holds true for me today. Which gets me to number what? 5. This nondescript 12-inch from a band called Whistle, and the song Nothing Serious, Just Buggin', from 1986. That one was from 1985. You can see these first 5 are all from 85, 86. And I probably bought all these around that time, except for the 5-star, which again, I don't know where that came from. Thanks, bro. Whistle was one of those quote unquote fun hip hop bands in the 1980s, like early DJ Jazzy Jeff and Fresh Prince and, people like that, or Lottie Dottie, We Like to Party, that dude whose name escapes me right now. But those kind of songs where they really brought it, they were awesome songs. Their intention was to be a lighthearted and fun, humorous even in a lot of ways. And Whistle was one of those bands. This was their biggest hit, again from 1986, and it did what a lot of 80s rap songs did, which was it sampled either TV show theme songs or public domain songs. In this case, it was public domain songs, and it was used a sample program from a keyboard where it was like a human's voice that would just pitch differently when you played it on the keys. I have a Casio SK1 was the one I had, which a good friend of mine rebought for me because I traded away that one for some dumb reason. And that really kind of plants it right smack in the 80s, that sound. It's interesting. I read up on Whistle a while ago because I almost put them in another podcast and they didn't quite fit. But what I found interesting was that they were kind of a crossover band because they started out as a hip hop band, and then I think they did 2 or 3 albums, and they had some personnel changes, et cetera, and just changes in I guess a desire of what they wanted to do, and decided to switch to kind of an R&B vocal band with thick harmonies and the whole thing, the way like Boyz II Men would be and people like that, but predated them and had a hit with a cover song, which I'm sorry I didn't write down, but look it up. Whistle's hit in the late 80s, I believe, 89, I want to say. And I thought it was cool that they were able to make that transition pretty smoothly. It's not something that many bands are able to do. Which brings me to this one, which, you could do an entire podcast on almost any of these. But this one in particular, right? So, Charlie Parker. Encores, the Savoy Sessions. Released in 77, but recorded in 1944. And I'm sure bought in 85 or 86 by me at a thrift store, at a record store in the thrift bin, to be more precise. I've always been a huge Charlie Parker fan, and I am not, when it comes to jazz, because I am jazz-wise, I'm primarily a pianist and a vocalist with very, very, very light bass and guitar jazz skills, let's be honest. Those are the instruments I gravitate to when I'm listening to jazz. Not that I don't love horns, not that I don't love clarinet and reed instruments and things like that. There are so many other violin even, man, jazz. So there's some jazz violin out there that just kills. But you go with the thing and what I always what I learned on very early on was jazz piano and jazz vocals, and that's why this is special to me, because of course Charlie Parker is a saxophonist, right? And yeah, I love and respect a lot of horn players in jazz. He was always one of my favorites because he kind of straddled that line between more traditional jazz of the 30s and early 40s and the hard bop that would come afterwards. And he was smack in the bebop, you know, in the 40s and early 50s and all that. And what I like about that is that it had that kind of still like lyrical quality and tonal quality of more traditional jazz with just the fly by the seat of your pants, you know, the solos and breakneck speed and dissonance, you know, that bebop is known for, and even more so in hard bop, which took it even further. So, you know, this has always been kind of a special album for me, and most especially because there's a song on here that has vocals. Like I said, I gravitate towards that, and it's a song called Romance Without Finance. And if you don't know the song, look it up. It's been covered by several people. I believe Cassandra Wilson covered it. I don't know. So many people. I looked it up last year because I put it in one of my Facebook Live sets, one of the jazzier, bluesier sets, and really wanted to grab onto that song because it's always been one of my favorites. So, you know, there are so many other great songs on this album, Tiny's tempo and all that. I would recommend listening to it, though, just for Romance Without Finance, because it's both jazzy and fun, which is a cool thing. And staring at this rounded metal object on the table, we have now come, lo, these many whatevers, couple years, to the end of my vinyl collection. There are no more. Somebody's going to gift me something next week, probably, and then what? I don't know. But right now, there are no more. And that's exciting to me, because we are entering into the next phase next week, and that next phase is CDs. And let me tell you, at a certain point, I had probably around 1,000 to 1,200 CDs. I traded some of them in before I moved. Kept a list, though, of the ones I really, you know, still liked but didn't necessarily need. I still have, I would say, well, several hundred at least. So we're going to be at this a while. And I'm excited about that too, because the CDs have some old stuff the way the vinyl and the cassettes did, but they certainly much more represent the more recent years and decades. Maybe not the most recent years, because who buys CDs anymore? But the most recent decades, which is really going to change the nature of what we're talking about, which is why, if you're listening on audio, this is the end of Season 2, and thank you for listening. Season 3 is going to kick off with the CDs, most likely next week, unless something comes up. Anyway, you know, just to wrap up, are you into any of these artists? Hello, that's my hand on the screen. Do you remember Charlie Parker? Did you like Charlie Parker? Do you have any idea who Whistle is? Or Five Star? Do you remember Freddie Jackson and Billy Ocean? Come on, you should. And Bad Company, of course, who I think is still around in one form or another. I don't know. I really don't know. But much respect to all of them. And to anybody who has as weird a vinyl collection or any type of collection as I do, because weirdness is awesome, which brings me to the link that you see at the bottom there, my band Rex box set, recently completed, called The Weird Objective, 5 albums, 5 different styles of music, 4 different bands, several guest vocalists, 24 originals, 6 covers, and 2 bonus tracks, 32 tracks in all. Please click on that link and check it out. And as always, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching and sharing and clicking and subscribing and all the stuff that we're all supposed to do, and contributing. If you are on Patreon, you're very special to me. My objective here, as always, is music, conversation, and connection. Thank you, and we'll talk soon.